Chess is an extremely difficult and emotionally taxing game, but one of the best feelings is when you play a long game about like 80 moves or so and come out on top. If you want to see how I did that against an 1800 rated opponent, stick around. Welcome to the chessboard. We're going to play a little Caro-Kann here. If you know me, you know that's the only thing I play against d4. And we play a Tartakower. The Tartakower is this, where you go ahead and take the pawn, play knight f6, and the knight takes, and you get this structure. This is the Tartakower structure, and you have the open E files, semi-open D file with white's pawn in the center. And the general plan for black is to develop pieces to natural squares. Say the knight is here, and the knight to d7, castle, get rooks to the center, and life is good. And we see I have just that. I bring my bishops out to good squares, I castle, so does my opponent. I play rook e8, getting my rook to the open e file, and h3 is not a big deal. I just drop my bishop back, no biggie. And knight d7, queen c7, and I'm just developing my pieces, getting here, the rook's getting in, and we're chilling. Now here's the thing, I have a confession to make. This is about as much as I know. I know get my pieces to good squares and then try and figure it out. But the thing is, I need to really dedicate some time to studying this opening because it's insane. There's a bunch of times you're supposed to play c5 and allow d5, which is really scary, allowing this passed pawn through. But sometimes this is the right plan. But I did pretty well in this game. I went ahead and played knight f8, which is one of, the top moves. Knight f8, which looks a little bit silly, but it opens the rooks, and the knight may be rerouting to these squares, and in case the bishop drops back, if the bishop's on d3, then if takes, I can take back with the knight, and, the h7 pawn is always protected in case there's ever any worry about that. Yeah? So that's knight f8. We have knight h4. Really wants to trade bishops, so okay, let's trade bishops. And I play knight g6. He takes. I wasn't worried about this. Yes, I've got a couple of doubled pawns, but they're actually not that bad. The pawn cube defends itself. It's kind of interesting, right? Because this pawn defends that one, right? And the king defends both of these. It's very sturdy, actually. And there's cases where these two pawns can march forward and your king stays safe, so maybe you can get some kind of kingside attack going even without moving these pawns away from your king. It's very interesting. My opponent doubles his rooks on the e file here, looking to get some pressure going, which I'll tell you is pretty annoying, because I wanted to play something like bishop f4, but this is bad, because bishop f4, and you can't even take, right? Because you lose your rook down here, and the game soon to follow. And if you try to take the rook first, well then bishop c7, and you have to sack the queen here, king h2, and try to go for something like this, where you got two rooks against a queen and a bishop, but this is not good. Not good. And if you try to instead, after this, take the queen, then they take your rook, and you're just down a bishop. So I saw that during the game. I saw all of this, and I thought, well, that's silly. I can't play bishop f4, because I just lose. So let's play queen d7. Let's play a patient move that just kind of maybe tries to get the queen to f5 for a trade. Something just defends my e rook a second time so that if these rooks come down, I'm not worried about all the exchanges. Bishop back to d2 opens up the rooks on the d file, and I play the wrong approach. I should have taken here, and this is what I mean. b5, right? This plan, it looks weird because I didn't want this backwards pawn here. Like, this pawn is stuck here, but it's preventing d5. I don't know. It just looked weird with the holes here, and I didn't want to go for it. There's something like a4, and you just play a6, and you get something like this going on. That's what computer wanted me to do. But instead, I play rook e6. Trying to double rooks, not really worrying about this too much. I know I was worried about this. But apparently this actually just blunders a pawn. Don't listen to me. Anyway, we have queen back to c1. He does not take the rook. Instead, goes back to c1, and I double my rooks. So now we both got double rooks on the e file. We go ahead and trade a pair of rooks. Trade a second pair of rooks, and trade bishops. Okay, so what to come of this mass simplification? I've got this weird pawn cube, and my opponent has a 4 on 3. So I have to worry about these pawns advancing and creating a passed pawn here. But I get this pawn. But then my opponent gives me this check and takes this pawn, which I saw. I did see all of this, right? I calculated, okay, takes, check, here, takes, okay? Then I can't take this pawn because the queen defends it. So maybe I have some check. But I figured, okay, I'll go back here, defend both of my pawns, and maybe try to sneak in something over here. So let's see what we have. Takes, takes, check, takes. Okay, and I play this. That was my whole idea. And then we have b3, which is a mistake. You know why? Check! Okay, king moves. Yeah, but I get this pawn now. I get c3. Before you moved the pawn forward, I wouldn't be able to take this pawn. But now, I get c3. And yeah, you can take a7, but I take b3. And now I'm just up a pawn. And I'm better in the endgame. Yes, it's still probably a draw. Why is that? Well, the queen endgame is tricky, right? Because my king is not going to be able to get out and help very much because the queen is just going to give me never-ending checks, right? But let's see what happens. I go ahead and drop my queen here, offering a queen trade, because if we get something like this on the board, then I'm likely going to be winning in this endgame. Computer says slightly better for black, but I'm up a pawn in the king and pawn endgame, and I figured that I would be able to make something out of that. So opponent does not trade queens. Keep the queens on. Good move, or good idea. So I drop my queen back, give a check, and this is where we kind of shuffle a lot. I offer a queen trade. I start slowly but surely pushing my pawns forward, right? I give a couple of checks, go back, no big deal, and I block all the checks from my opponent, and I'm trying to push my pawns forward and walk them with my king and my queen, and maybe try to get a pawn through, right? That's kind of my idea. And so I'm pushing. You see, just moving my king up, pushing. And here I blundered a draw. I mean, it was likely a draw, but I was still slightly better. But, the queen starts giving checks now. And it's really hard to get out of the checks. Except, not that hard. Because now I block, and I get to run back to g5. Now I'm safe from the checks, and I can keep marching forward. And here, my opponent blundered. Here, my opponent needed to ignore the tension going on among these pawns and play like king f1, or queen d2, or even queen a1. Something like this. Just ignore the tension. But playing f3 locks it down. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just winning. Except I blundered the draw. Oh my goodness. How many times am I going to blunder this draw, man? Come on. Okay, so I'm completely winning. It's plus 30. You know what I have to find? That's not that hard to find after king here? Is this check. I completely missed the geometry of the board here. I missed that check and the queen can run this way. And after the king runs, you give the check. And the king runs, you give another check, forcing the king here. Do you take the queen? No, because you're not going to be able to get your king around and win these pawns because the white king is going to stop you. So what do? You take this pawn with check. And now you're just winning, right? Here, and you just go to a2 and this pawn is pushing. Yeah. This works, but a2 was even better. And this pawn is going. Can't stop it. Okay, I did not find that. Instead, I just gave this check and came in, thinking if the queen moves away and starts giving me checks, which it does, then I am going to try and checkmate white. Yeah, so let's see. My king goes on a marathon here. It goes on a long walk across the board. Check, 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 check. You can't take this pawn or you get checkmated, right? So that's what my opponent has to deal with. Instead, they just keep giving me checks, keep giving me checks. Now, you can't trade queens. No, you can't. Sorry, I was about to say you can't do this because it's stalemate. You'd have to take back with the pawn, right? So that you get this. So you can't trade queens. So he just keeps giving checks. This is a draw, but my opponent gives the wrong check. And now, king f2 check. King f2 check. A king move? That's a check! And completely wins the game. It's mate! It's mate! Because the queen has to block. And you just take. And it's checkmate. Look at that. A king move to give the check. This is insane. Discovered king move check. How about that? Listen, I'm only about 1800 online, yeah? And over the board, that translates to like negative poopy elo chess. But if you want to see me go over a Magnus Carlsen game where he crushed a Grandmaster in 19 moves at the age of 13, make sure you check out this video. All right, have a good one, guys.